Chanel and Meghan Markle, inside the alleged $8 million dispute shaking the luxury world. The global luxury industry, typically defined by discretion and controlled silence, is confronting an extraordinary situation following emerging allegations involving Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, and the House of Chanel. According to multiple industry sources, what began as a routine couture lending relationship has allegedly escalated into a dispute carrying potential financial exposure in the millions of dollars. While no lawsuit has been confirmed publicly and no court filings are available at the time of writing, persistent reports from fashion executives, legal consultants, and luxury logistics professionals indicate that Chanel has been conducting an extensive internal review related to garment usage tied to the Duchess of Sussex. The alleged scale and seriousness of the matter have prompted heightened legal scrutiny within one of the most powerful privately held fashion houses in the world. If substantiated, the situation would represent one of the most significant confrontations ever to emerge between a global luxury brand and a modern public figure of royal status. A rare breach of luxury silence. Luxury fashion houses operate under an unwritten code. Disputes are resolved quietly, reputations are managed internally, and public escalation is avoided at almost any cost. For this reason alone, the emergence of repeated allegations involving Chanel has raised alarm within elite fashion circles. According to several individuals familiar with high fashion compliance practices, Chanel has allegedly identified irregularities connected to couture garments loaned to Meghan over an extended period. These concerns, sources say, were not triggered by a single event, but by what internal teams reportedly viewed as a recurring pattern that required formal review. Chanel has not commented publicly. Meghan's representatives have also remained silent. Yet silence in this context is not unusual. High-value disputes involving elite institutions are often handled behind closed doors for months, sometimes years, before any public acknowledgement occurs, if it occurs at all. How couture lending actually works. Public perception often assumes that couture gowns worn by celebrities are gifts or personal purchases. In reality, nearly all couture worn at high-profile events is governed by contractual lending agreements. Under these agreements, garments are loaned for specific, pre-approved uses. Where beyond those terms is prohibited without authorization. Alterations are tightly restricted. Public appearances must align with brand strategy. Garments are returned under strict condition requirements. Failure to comply can result in contractual penalties, blacklisting, or legal action. These rules apply equally, whether the individual is an actor, influencer, or member of royalty. According to industry sources, Meghan was allegedly granted access to Chanel Couture under such conditions. The access itself reflected significant trust and prestige, as Chanel is known to be among the most selective luxury houses in the world. The alleged irregularities. According to individuals familiar with the matter, Chanel's internal compliance teams reportedly identified concerns related to the condition, timing, and documented use of certain loaned garments. These concerns allegedly centered on whether some pieces may have been worn publicly beyond the scope of agreed terms. Several sources independently referenced a figure of approximately 47 garments potentially involved in disputed activity. This number has not been confirmed publicly nor verified by documentation, but its repeated mention across unrelated fashion industry contacts has intensified scrutiny. If accurate, such a volume would place the situation far outside the boundaries of a typical styling disagreement. Fashion law experts note that disputes usually involve one or two pieces, not dozens. Why unauthorized wear is a serious legal issue. In couture, a garment's value is tied not only to craftsmanship, but to exclusivity, once worn publicly without authorization. The garment may lose resale and lending value. Planned editorial or client placements can collapse. The brand may face reputational and contractual consequences. In some cases, luxury houses are forced to remove garments permanently from circulation. This creates measurable financial loss, particularly for couture pieces that may cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce. Legal experts consulted for this report explain that repeated unauthorized usage could potentially be framed as breach of contract, unjust enrichment, or misrepresentation, depending on the circumstances and jurisdiction. The $8 million figure. The reported figure of $8 million circulating in fashion and legal circles has drawn significant attention. Industry analysts stress that couture-related damages are rarely calculated by retail price alone. They may include production cost write-offs, loss of exclusivity value, contractual penalties per violation, brand dilution assessments, legal, investigative, and compliance expenses. When multiplied across numerous garments and extended time frames, total exposure can reach 7 or 8 figures without requiring extraordinary assumptions. No public document confirms the $8 million estimate. However, multiple professionals contacted for this report describe it as plausible within the context of couture compliance disputes. The role of internal documentation. One of the most sensitive aspects of the situation involves alleged internal documentation. Luxury houses track couture garments meticulously, often maintaining digital movement logs, condition reports, visual inspection records, security-monitored handling areas. Some sources allege that Chanel possesses internal documentation, possibly including visual records, related to garment returns that triggered further review. These claims remain unverified, and no such materials have been made public. Legal analysts emphasize that the existence of internal records alone can dramatically shift negotiation dynamics, even if those records never become public evidence. Why this could not be ignored. Fashion insiders suggest that Chanel's alleged response was driven less by the identity of the individual involved and more by the principle at stake. Allowing alleged misuse of couture garments without consequence could weaken enforcement across the entire luxury industry. For Chanel, brand control is not symbolic. It is foundational. Precedent matters, particularly in an era where influencer culture increasingly blurs traditional boundaries. If allegations were substantiated and left unaddressed, they could undermine the authority of couture lending agreements worldwide. On the current status. As of publication, no lawsuit has been confirmed publicly. No court filings are accessible. No statements have been issued by either party. Legal and fashion insiders suggest discussions remain private and ongoing. Whether the matter is resolved quietly or escalates into public litigation remains uncertain. What is clear is that the luxury industry is watching closely. According to individuals familiar with luxury brand operations, the relationship between Chanel and Meghan did not allegedly deteriorate overnight. Instead, sources describe a gradual accumulation of concerns that unfolded across multiple fashion cycles, appearances, and logistics reviews. Couture lending relationships typically operate on rolling trust. As long as garments are returned in approved condition, on schedule, and used strictly within contractual terms, access continues. When anomalies appear, brands quietly investigate without alerting the recipient. Several industry sources say Chanel's internal reviews initially focused on logistics discrepancies, routine checks that flagged timing inconsistencies between scheduled returns and documented appearances. Such flags are not uncommon and often resolve quickly. What allegedly elevated concern was repetition. According to these accounts, compliance teams began noting patterns that suggested certain garments may have been worn publicly in ways not aligned with original authorization. At that point, routine review reportedly shifted into a formal internal assessment. How celebrity fashion lending is policed behind the scenes. Luxury houses maintain enforcement systems largely invisible to the public. Fashion lending is governed not only by contracts, but by layered verification processes involving styling confirmations, event approval logs, photographic cross-referencing, media monitoring, return condition audits. When a public figure appears in a garment, luxury houses track exposure across global media. Images are cataloged, timestamps are logged, and appearances are compared against approved usage. According to fashion compliance professionals, it is often media coverage itself that reveals unauthorized wear. Once images circulate, they cannot be retracted, and the garment's exclusivity may be permanently compromised. This is why alleged unauthorized appearances, if substantiated, are treated as serious contractual violations rather than minor infractions. The alleged escalation within Chanel. Multiple insiders describe a moment when the situation allegedly reached what one source characterized as non-negotiable territory. At this stage, routine brand management reportedly gave way to legal consultation. Chanel, according to individuals familiar with its corporate culture, treats legal escalation as a last resort. The brand's preference is always to resolve matters discreetly, preserving mystique and minimizing public exposure. However, sources suggest that the scale of the alleged issue, particularly the number of garments involved, may have removed discretion as a viable option. At a certain point, luxury houses must protect not only assets, but authority. Why royal status does not change fashion law. One misconception frequently cited by commentators is that royal or quasi-royal status confers immunity within elite systems. Fashion law experts reject this assumption outright. Couture contracts do not contain exemptions for titles, global influence, or media visibility. In fact, high-profile individuals are often held to stricter standards, precisely because their appearances generate maximum exposure. According to legal analysts, if unauthorized use were proven, status could become a liability rather than a shield. The broader the exposure, the greater the measurable damage. This principle, insiders say, is central to why Chanel would allegedly pursue enforcement regardless of the individual involved. The role of image and personal branding. Another dimension under scrutiny by industry observers is the intersection between couture usage and personal brand building. Fashion law specialists note that disputes often hinge on whether a garment was used to derive reputational or commercial benefit beyond approved terms. If a public figure appears in couture during activities tied to personal branding, partnerships, or image rehabilitation without authorization, the brand may argue unjust enrichment. In such cases, damages calculations may include not only garment value, but the perceived benefit gained through association. This is one reason luxury disputes can quickly escalate beyond six figures. The security and documentation question revisited. As discussed earlier, claims regarding internal documentation, including handling and security records, remain unverified. However, fashion logistics experts confirm that couture houses routinely maintain comprehensive records of garment movement. These records are not designed for public consumption. They exist to protect the brand in the event of internal disputes, insurance claims, or contractual enforcement. Legal experts note that such documentation, even if never shown publicly, can dramatically influence negotiations. When one party believes the other holds detailed records, leverage shifts immediately. This dynamic alone, analysts say, could explain the extended silence from all sides. Why no public lawsuit yet? Observers unfamiliar with high-value disputes often assume that serious allegations would immediately result in public court filings. In reality, the opposite is often true. Luxury brands prefer confidential arbitration, pre-litigation settlements, contractual enforcement without public filings. Public lawsuits are pursued only when negotiations fail. Precedent must be established. Silence risks weakening brand authority. Sources indicate that the absence of public filings does not imply inactivity. Instead, it suggests ongoing legal positioning behind closed doors. Potential outcomes being discussed privately. According to legal and fashion insiders, several scenarios are being actively discussed within industry circles. 1. Quiet settlement. The dispute could be resolved through confidential agreement with financial compensation and formal severance of ties. 2. Permanent blacklisting. Chanel could simply close the relationship permanently without public explanation, a move that would still carry significant industry consequences. 3. Precedent-setting litigation. If internal resolution fails, formal legal action could be pursued to establish enforcement authority. 4. Industry-wide policy shifts. Regardless of outcome, luxury houses may tighten lending protocols for all high-profile figures. Each outcome carries reputational implications far beyond the immediate parties. The broader impact on Hollywood and influencer culture. Fashion insiders emphasize that this situation is being watched closely, not just by luxury brands, but by stylists, publicists, and celebrities worldwide. If allegations of misuse were substantiated and enforced, access to couture could become more restricted. Influencer style lending could be sharply curtailed. Contract enforcement could become more aggressive. Luxury houses, analysts say, are increasingly wary of blurred boundaries between prestige and promotion. This case, real or rumored, has already intensified that concern. Meghan's brand at a crossroads. From a reputational standpoint, experts note that any prolonged association with a dispute involving luxury compliance could complicate future partnerships. Brands value predictability, control, and compliance. Even unresolved allegations can introduce perceived risk, particularly in industries built on image management. At the same time, legal analysts caution against assuming outcome. Allegations alone do not establish liability, and disputes of this nature are often resolved without fault being admitted by either side. Why this story refuses to fade. Despite the absence of public confirmation, the story persists because it touches a deeper tension: the collision between modern celebrity culture and institutions that predate it. Chanel has survived wars, cultural revolutions, and decades of shifting trends by enforcing one principle relentlessly: control. When that control is challenged, even indirectly, response is inevitable. Final analysis. At this stage, what exists are allegations, insider accounts, and industry concern, not courtroom findings.